This whole learning experience was such a great opportunity for me in so many different ways. From starting with nothing, getting to know my students, identifying the focus students, building a lesson plan, then turning that into an actual lesson and seeing the children that I was teaching meet the learning goal that I set out for them was really something that I take pride in. We focused on adding and subtracting decimals, but rather than just teaching them the strategies, looking as to why we do what we do or how adding and subtracting decimals can help us, we can really expand their thinking and implement it into the future lessons. The following day after my showcase lesson, the topic was adding and subtracting decimals, but with context. So we had word problems with decimals in it, and students were having to dissect each sentence of the word problem and pull out the parts that they needed and the information they needed to find the final answer or find the missing part. I think that was something that I did really well in my lesson plan and something that I pulled out that I thought would really help them for future lessons. Being able to understand why it is that we do what we do in math or how it's done, as opposed to just finding the answer and stopping there. Getting children to actually sit down and think about what it is that they're doing is something that really helps them in terms of understanding and becoming proficient in that area. A lot of times when we talk about the explanations behind the math that we do, it really enhances their understanding of the academic language and the content that we're learning about. And when we sat there and we went through the Google Slides and whole group instruction, I asked students, how does place value apply to adding and subtracting decimals? How can we use place value in explaining our answer if we were going to write it out in word form? So being able to break things down in terms of that and identifying our content knowledge is something that I thought I did very well in. Another thing that I thought I did well in was using multiple different instructional strategies. We started in whole group and we worked our way into breakout rooms. So we had whole group instruction where it was me talking to 30 students. But then we had breakout rooms where students worked individually on a problem, then they came into duos and worked together, and then we had groups of 4 all working together to get a final answer. Having this, that allowed some of my focus students to be able to take all this wide range of instructional strategies and find what works best for them. I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to do what they did the best and apply it into the lesson that I taught. And I thought that I did that very well. Something that I thought I could definitely, though, improve upon was using the whiteboard resource that I had. So I had a physical whiteboard behind me, and we did a problem together on the board. However, due to the glare or the quality of Zoom, it was really difficult and it didn't really show up on the student's screen very well, so it was hard for them to see. So after that lesson, I sat down and thought of different ways that I could show my work and get the students involved as well. And I came across a resource called whiteboard.fi, and it was a collaborative whiteboard where I could literally write on my touchscreen computer the problem out and show them how I would add a decimal or how I would subtract a decimal. But the great thing about that was that there's a class code and I could get all 30 of my students in there doing the work as well. And I could track the progress of each of my students. So moving forward, I've not used the whiteboard since, but rather have switched over to using the whiteboard.fi. I think that really helped. Also, the whole point of this lesson was to set them up for the future lessons in the topic and setting them up for success and being able to do this in many different aspects of learning. And I thought that really helped, being that we sat and we focused so hard on the components of adding and subtracting decimals and working together, but then allowing them to work on their own. And I think that of all these things that I tried to implement in my lesson, nearly 90% of my students met the learning goal that I set out for them, and that was what they were able to succeed with when it came to the assessment. That was one area that they did really well in. Across the board, nearly all the children got the adding and subtracting decimal problems right, and I think it was due in large part to the lesson plan that I set out for them.